The black Maybach carved a silent path down Michigan Avenue, its tires hissing against pavement damp with a cold October mist. Inside the opulent cabin, the atmosphere was a vacuum, so quiet the click of the turn signal sounded like a hammer blow. Victoria Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Innovations, was losing a battle with her smartphone. Her voice, usually a blade, was frayed. "Leo, what are you telling me? That's not possible. All 3 translation services are unavailable." Her hands trembled, smudging mascara across her cheek. The once perfect chignon of her blonde hair had started to unravel. "This is a $1.2 billion partnership, Leo. The Tanaka Sharma delegation lands in less than 2 hours." In the driver's seat, Marcus Hayes, a man of 52 with a quiet, powerful build, kept his focus on the slick, rain-swept street. Yet he absorbed every panicked word. He recognized the pattern. Sterling Innovations was teetering on a knife's edge. A low, smooth jazz melody drifted from the speakers. Marcus reached forward, intending to mute the sound and give her a moment of pure silence to think. Before his fingers could reach the console, Victoria's head whipped around. "Keep your brutish hands off my car." The words hung in the air, cold and sharp. Marcus's hand froze in mid-air. In the rearview mirror, his dark, usually gentle eyes held a flicker of something ancient and weary, a profound exhaustion that went far beyond the long hours. 3 years. 3 years of barbs like that. Victoria wasn't finished. Her voice dripped with disdain. "Does being my driver give you the right to touch my property? You are hired help. Remember your place." Marcus's hands tightened on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, his knuckles showing faintly. He stared straight ahead, at the blurred lights of the Chicago skyline, seen through a curtain of rain. But his mind's eye was clear, replaying scenes from a different life. A G7 summit in Kyoto, 2015. He'd stood discreetly behind world leaders, his voice a bridge preventing a currency crisis, an honorary doctorate from the University of Chicago, a master's degree in international policy from Johns Hopkins, 22 years of distinguished service with the U.S. State Department, with fluency in 9 languages. And now he was the help. Victoria let out a sharp, frustrated breath. "Raise the partition," she commanded, her voice like ice. "I've had enough of looking at you." A sheet of smoked glass ascended with a soft whir, sealing him in his own world. In the back, Victoria resumed her frantic calls. In the front, Marcus sat in a cocoon of silence, his jaw set. No tears came, because Marcus Hayes knew a secret that Victoria Sterling did not. The man she had just dismissed as a brute was the only person who could save her company. The Maybach moved through the rain, a vessel containing 2 separate realities. Behind the glass, Victoria Sterling, clad in a $7,000 Chanel suit, was coming apart. She was on her 8th call. "Diane, I don't care if it costs $60,000. Find me an interpreter who is fluent in both Japanese and Mandarin immediately." Her voice was cracking. "No, we cannot reschedule. They will walk away. 3 years of work will be gone." In front, Marcus Hayes drove on, his face an impassive mask. But inside, a different storm was raging. He remembered a year ago, on this very street, when the Munich deal fell apart over a simple translation error. He remembered 6 months ago, when the Seoul negotiations collapsed because Victoria had used a culturally inappropriate phrase while addressing the chairman of a major tech giant. A $50 million loss. He had known how to prevent it, but he had remained silent. Why? Because she would never have listened to her driver. Today was different. Today, 200 employees were on the verge of losing their jobs. He was one of them, and his daughter, Maya, a second-year student at Northwestern's medical school, believed her father was a freelance linguistics consultant working on a book. She had no idea he was a chauffeur. Every month, Marcus wired her the tuition, $72,000 a year, with a note, "Here's the grant money for this month, sweetheart." And Maya's reply was always the same. "You're the most incredible dad in the world." Each time he read those words, Marcus gritted his teeth and kept driving. Victoria's phone continued to ring unanswered. A litany of voicemails. She was trembling, dialing again in a fit of desperation. Through the car's rear-facing camera, Marcus could see her reflection, pacing the small space like a cornered animal. Her hair was a mess. Mascara streaked her face. Her eyes were puffy. This was not the woman who had graced the cover of Fortune. This was a person on the verge of drowning, and Marcus knew the full truth. Sterling Innovations had barely 3 months of operating capital left. His years behind the wheel had made him privy to enough hushed conversations to understand the company's dire state. Her next call was to Leo Vance, her chief legal counsel. Leo, if they withdraw, For the first time in 3 years, Marcus heard Victoria Sterling's voice break with a sob. That was the moment his decision was made. He pressed a button, and the glass partition slid down. "Excuse me, Miss Sterling," Victoria flinched, her eyes flashing with fury. "I told you," Marcus cut her off, his voice deep and steady. "What languages do you require?" The cabin went silent. Victoria's mouth hung open. She seemed to have forgotten Leo on the other end of the line. What did you say?" Marcus met her gaze in the rearview mirror, his tone now crisp and professional. "For the merger. Which languages will be necessary? That is none of your concern." "Japanese and Mandarin," Marcus continued, his voice even. "Also Hindi and possibly Korean." Something in his tone, a quiet authority she had never heard before, made her hesitate. This was not the voice of her silent, deferential chauffeur. "I am fluent in Japanese, Mandarin, Hindi, Korean, Arabic, Portuguese, French, German, and Spanish." Victoria's world tilted on its axis. Her phone slipped from her grasp, landing on the plush carpet with a muffled thud. You speak 9 languages? Would you like a demonstration?" Before she could formulate a response, her phone, lying on the floor, lit up and began to ring. The name on the screen made her stomach clench. Tanaka Kenji, Tokyo office. Victoria stared at the phone, then at Marcus, then back at the phone. Pride and utter desperation warred in her eyes. The phone continued its insistent chiming. Finally, with a trembling hand, she passed the device through the opening in the divider. She said nothing, but they both understood. This was the moment that could change everything. Marcus lifted the phone to his ear, and his entire demeanor shifted. The modest, hesitant air of a driver vanished, replaced by the calm, confident, and authoritative presence of a man who had moved in the highest circles of global diplomacy. "Moshi moshi, Tanaka-san. Kochira wa Marcus Hayes to Mushimas." There was a momentary pause on the line, then a man's voice responded in smooth, impeccable Japanese. Victoria sat frozen, not understanding a word but sensing a palpable shift in the atmosphere. Marcus's tone wasn't just that of an interpreter. He was actively negotiating. He tilted his head, listening intently, nodding at intervals, and responding with phrases that seemed to warm the voice on the other end, making the conversation more personal. The way he pronounced Tanaka-san, the precise cadence of his speech. Every nuance conveyed a profound cultural understanding. Then a second voice, sharp and rapid, joined the call, speaking Mandarin. Without a moment's hesitation, Marcus switched languages, his flow seamless, his pronunciation perfect and unaccented. Technical jargon started to fly. Intellectual property, ownership transfer, market entry strategies. Victoria recognized the terms. They were the most contentious points of the entire merger, the very issues she was risking everything to secure. And the man she had called a brute just 20 minutes earlier was now debating these points in 3 different languages as if he were born to it. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. The Maybach continued its journey through the rain-soaked canyons of downtown Chicago. But inside the car, time had stopped. Finally, Marcus inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect the person on the other end couldn't see, and ended the call with a graceful, "Arigatou gozaimasu, Tanaka-san." He handed the phone back to Victoria. "They are looking forward to the meeting. The merger discussions have been reinstated." Victoria stared at the phone as if it were an explosive device, then looked at Marcus, her voice a hoarse whisper. What did you just do?" Marcus looked straight ahead, his tone as calm and professional as if this were a daily occurrence. "It was a minor cultural misunderstanding. Your legal team's preliminary contract used language that was overly direct. They felt they were being treated as a subsidiary, not a partner. The blood drained from Victoria's face. What kind of misunderstanding? The kind that terminates a deal, Marcus replied simply. The car paused at an intersection, the red light painting his stern profile. I explained that Sterling Innovations holds their family-run legacy in the highest regard, and that you personally took the time to study Japanese corporate customs to show your respect. Victoria's mouth fell open. But I never— Now you have, Marcus said evenly, his eyes fixed on the road as the rain began to fall harder. Victoria sat in stunned silence. The Maybach turned into the subterranean parking garage of the Sterling Innovations building on Wacker Drive. The engine cut out, leaving an echoing silence in the cold, concrete space. Victoria could hear the frantic beating of her own heart. Marcus, she said, using his first name for the first time in 3 years. I need you to tell me everything. He met her eyes in the rearview mirror. For a second, the partition between them felt like an insurmountable wall. Then, he gave a slight nod. PhD in International Relations from the University of Chicago. Master's in Applied Linguistics from Johns Hopkins SAIS. 22 years as a senior diplomatic interpreter for the U.S. State Department. Each word was a blow, striking Victoria with the force of a physical impact. I specialized in multinational trade agreements, G7 summits, and crisis mediation. He paused, his voice unwavering. Budget cuts eliminated my position 3 years ago. I needed a job immediately. Your mother's medical bills, Victoria murmured, recalling fragments of conversations she'd overheard but never paid attention to. Cancer, wasn't it? Marcus nodded. Cancer treatments, and my daughter's medical school tuition. Maya is at Northwestern. She wants to be a pediatric oncologist. She watched her grandmother battle the disease. The harsh fluorescent lighting of the garage cast long shadows. Victoria looked down at her own hands, which were still shaking. I submitted over 300 applications, Marcus continued. I was either overqualified or too old. So you became a driver. I became what I had to be to survive. Their eyes met in the mirror, and in that instant, the 3 years of his silent service took on a monumental weight. The presence of a man she had looked at every day but had never truly seen. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Chloe, her assistant. The Tanaka delegation has arrived early. They're in the lobby asking about cultural protocols. No one here knows what to tell them. They're here, Victoria whispered. Marcus got out, walked around the car, and opened her door with the same professional grace he always had. But this time, everything was different. As Victoria stood, she looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. Will you help me save my company? Marcus raised his gaze, his dark eyes steady and clear. Let's save it together, Ms. Sterling. The elevator ascended in silence toward the 50th floor. Victoria stood beside Marcus, the space between them no more than a few feet. Yet it felt like a chasm. She stole a glance at his reflection in the mirrored wall. The simple black chauffeur's uniform, the perfectly knotted tie, the strong 52-year-old face etched with lines not of age, but of experience and quiet endurance. 3 years. She had seen this man every single day for 3 years, and had known nothing about him. Marcus, she started, her voice raspy. This morning in the car, Ms. Sterling, he interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. We have 16 hours to prepare for the most critical meeting in this company's history. Personal apologies can wait. He was right, but her own cruel words, keep your brutish hands off my car, echoed in her mind like a stain she couldn't wash away. The elevator doors slid open to reveal Chloe Jensen, her 28-year-old assistant, her red hair tied back in a severe bun, her face pale with anxiety. Victoria, thank goodness. The advanced team is in conference room A. They're asking about gift-giving customs and seating arrangements, and nobody knows. It's handled, Victoria cut her off, her voice suddenly decisive. Chloe, this is Marcus Hayes, our new lead translation advisor. Chloe froze, her eyes darting from Marcus's uniform to Victoria's face in utter confusion. I'm sorry, what did you say? Mr. Hayes will be overseeing all international communications for the merger. But he's a University of Chicago PhD, fluent in 9 languages, Victoria said, her tone sharp as broken glass. Are there any further questions? The color rushed to Chloe's cheeks. She dropped her gaze. No, ma'am. Good, Victoria said, turning to Marcus. One thing. He waited. You should probably change before you meet the delegation. For the first time, a small, sad, knowing smile touched Marcus's lips. You're right. Chloe escorted Marcus down to the luxury men's boutique on the ground floor that Sterling Innovations kept on retainer for visiting executives. Left alone, Victoria stood in her expansive corner office on the 52nd floor, a glass box overlooking Millennium Park and the vast gray expanse of Lake Michigan. She stared at her trembling hands and heard her own voice again. Remember your place. Who was that woman? What had she become? She walked to the small bar, poured a glass of Macallan 25, took a single sip, and placed it on the windowsill. Her reflection stared back. A 41-year-old woman in a $7,000 suit with a soul she barely recognized. Her phone buzzed with a name she hadn't called in 2 years. Mom. Victoria answered. Mom? Tori, sweetheart, the warm voice of Catherine Sterling, retired and living in Michigan, filled the line. I saw the news. It sounds like your big deal is about to happen. Yes, Mom. Are you okay? You sound exhausted. Victoria gazed out at the rain streaking down the glass, and suddenly her eyes filled with tears. Mom, I think I've forgotten everything you taught me. There was a pause, and then her mother's voice came back, soft as a whisper. Tori, I taught you that true strength isn't about looking down on people. It's about who you can lift up. A sob caught in Victoria's throat. I did something terrible today, Mom. Then make it right, sweetheart, Catherine said gently. It is never too late to become the person you were meant to be. Victoria closed her eyes, her tears mingling with the sound of the rain against the window. 15 minutes later, her office door opened, and she had to suppress a gasp. Marcus walked in, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy Brioni suit that fit his broad shoulders flawlessly. He wore a silver silk tie and polished black Allen Edmonds shoes. His hair was neatly trimmed, the few silver strands at his temples adding to his distinguished presence. The most significant change wasn't the clothing, it was his posture. His shoulders were back, his chin was high. The dark eyes that had so often been lowered in deference now met hers with a steady, confident gaze. This was not her driver. This was a diplomat, a man who had sat in rooms where the fate of nations was decided. Better? Marcus asked. Much better, Victoria murmured, her own voice sounding small. Chloe appeared at the door. Conference room A is ready. The advance delegation is waiting. Victoria took a deep breath and straightened her suit. Before she walked out, she turned back. Marcus, are you ready? Marcus Hayes, the former senior interpreter for the U.S. State Department, who had been underestimated for 3 long years, gave a quiet, confident smile. Miss Sterling, I have mediated disputes between nuclear powers. I believe I can handle a business meeting. For the first time in what felt like years, Victoria Sterling felt a flicker of something she had long since forgotten. Hope. The two of them walked out of the office side by side, no longer employer and employee, but allies about to fight the same war. Conference Room A at Sterling Innovations was a testament to American corporate power. A 30-foot mahogany table, Italian leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling glass walls with a panoramic view of the Chicago River. But today, the air inside was stretched thin, humming with a quiet tension. The advance delegation from Tanaka Industries comprised 3 senior Japanese directors and their own interpreter. They all rose as Victoria and Marcus entered. Marcus stepped forward and executed a bow, the depth, angle, and duration all perfectly calibrated. It was not so low as to be servile, nor so high as to be arrogant. He then spoke in Japanese, his voice devoid of any American accent, carrying the natural, fluid tone of someone who had lived within the culture. The lead director, a Mr. Hashimoto, blinked in surprise before a slow smile spread across his face. He replied with a long, warm statement. Marcus turned to Victoria. Mr. Hashimoto expresses his pleasure that Sterling Innovations has sent someone who demonstrates a true understanding of Japanese customs. He says he feels respected. Victoria nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. Tell him that Sterling Innovations sees this not as a transaction, but as the beginning of a long-term partnership between two family legacies. Marcus gave a subtle nod and translated her sentiment. He didn't just repeat her words. He wove them into the cultural fabric of the Japanese language, adding nuance and a rhythm that conveyed deep sincerity. The atmosphere in the room began to thaw. The meeting proceeded with an almost surreal smoothness for 35 minutes, until Mr. Hashimoto's expression suddenly hardened. He spoke at length, his tone becoming more serious as he pointed to a clause in the contract. Marcus listened, his eyes narrowing. "Is something wrong?" Victoria whispered. Marcus turned to her, his voice low and serious. "Mr. Hashimoto says Clause 7 of the draft contract is phrased too directly. In Japanese business culture, this wording implies that we view them as subordinates, not as equal partners." The color drained from Victoria's face. This was exactly the kind of cultural blunder that could sabotage 3 years of work. "Which clause?" "The one regarding final decision-making authority." Marcus switched back to Japanese, his voice now calm and reassuring. He explained something, his tone like a gentle hand smoothing a wrinkled cloth. Mr. Hashimoto listened, his expression firm at first, then gradually softening. Marcus continued, this time telling a brief story. Victoria caught a few English words woven into the Japanese narrative: father, reconstruction, shared future. A brief silence fell over the room. Then Mr. Hashimoto nodded decisively, a genuine smile returning to his face as he spoke at length with real warmth. "What did he say?" Victoria asked softly. "He said his own father worked with American engineers after the war," Marcus replied, his tone low. "He understands that American legal language can seem rigid, but that the true intent is one of cooperation. He has agreed to revise the clause to reflect a more balanced partnership." Victoria let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, her hands trembling. But one question lingered in her mind. What had Marcus said to make a senior Japanese executive change his position so completely in a matter of minutes? When the delegation finally departed with warm handshakes and smiles, Victoria closed the conference room door. Only she and Marcus remained. "What did you tell Mr. Hashimoto?" she asked, her voice still hoarse. "About your father and the post-war rebuilding." Marcus removed his suit jacket, and for the first time, Victoria saw the exhaustion in his posture. "I told him about my father. He was a civil engineer. He worked in Japan from 1947 to 1952, helping to rebuild Osaka." Victoria sank into a chair, silent. "My father taught me that real partnership isn't found in contracts, but in trust. In two sides, building something together that is greater than themselves." Marcus turned to the window, where the Chicago skyline was beginning to fade into twilight. "I told him that his father, a survivor of the firebombing of Tokyo, and my father once worked together not as former adversaries, but as men building a new world." His voice grew quiet, carrying a deep, resonant ache. "I told him this merger isn't just about profit. It's about continuing the work our fathers started." Victoria felt a lump form in her throat. Was that true? Every word. The room fell silent. Outside, the lights of Chicago began to twinkle on. A galaxy of ambition spread out below them. "Marcus," Victoria whispered, "these past 3 years, how many of my meetings have you overheard?" "All of them. And you knew the company was heading for bankruptcy." "I knew last September." Victoria ran a hand through her hair, a sound of despair escaping her lips. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you help me before?" Marcus met her gaze, his eyes filled not with accusation, but with a deep sadness. "Ms. Sterling, I tried. On several occasions. But a driver's opinion on corporate strategy is not generally solicited, is it?" Memories rushed back, sharp and painful. A year ago, before the Munich deal. "Ms. Sterling, regarding the meeting, perhaps we should—" And she had cut him off. "Marcus, you're the driver. Just drive." 6 months ago. "Ms. Sterling, I believe the Korean team may have misinterpreted," and her sharp reply, "I don't pay you to think, Marcus." Each memory was a dagger to her conscience. So many missed opportunities, so many disasters that could have been averted. "My fault," Victoria whispered, her eyes glistening, It was all my fault. Marcus put his jacket back on, his voice calm but firm. Miss Sterling, we have 14 hours until the main negotiation begins. The past is irrelevant. Only the future matters now. He placed a thick binder on the table in front of her. Here is everything you need to know about tomorrow's key players, their personal histories, their negotiation styles, their cultural triggers. Victoria opened the binder. It was filled with dozens of pages of meticulous handwritten notes, as detailed and precise as a State Department briefing. When did you do all this? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus smiled, a faint but genuine smile. I've had a great deal of free time these past 3 years, Mrs. Sterling. At 8 a.m. the next morning, the boardroom at Sterling Innovations was electric with tension. Victoria had called an emergency meeting of her entire senior leadership team. They sat around the long mahogany table, their faces drawn and anxious. Everyone knew that in 6 hours, the fate of the company would be decided. Marcus Thorne, the 58-year-old executive vice president with silver hair and a perpetual scowl, spoke first. Victoria, we need some clarity. Where is the professional interpreter you hired? Victoria's reply was crisp. I'd like to introduce you to Marcus Hayes, our lead interpreter and strategist for today's merger. She gestured to the door. Marcus entered, wearing the same impeccable navy suit, his shoulders squared, his steps measured and confident. There was no trace of the chauffeur he had been. Every executive in the room turned to stare, their skepticism palpable. David Lee, the 45-year-old CTO, narrowed his eyes. Wait a minute. Isn't that Victoria? Isn't that your driver? The air crackled. Marcus Thorne tapped a pen against the table. Victoria, this is a $1.2 billion deal. We need a verified expert, not someone from the parking garage. Go on, say it, Marcus. Victoria's tone was glacial. Thorne swallowed hard. It's about optics, credibility. The Japanese delegation expects a certain level of professionalism. Diane Foster, the 52-year-old marketing director, nodded. We can't walk in there with someone who doesn't fit the image. Victoria tilted her head. And what image is that, Diane? Thorne interjected. Someone who looks the part, someone they will respect. Victoria's gaze swept across the room. You're questioning his qualifications? Thorne enunciated each word carefully. I'm questioning his fit. We can't risk everything on an unknown quantity. It was Marcus who spoke, his voice calm and steady. Mr. Thorne, what are your specific concerns regarding Japanese business etiquette? Thorne straightened in his chair, caught off guard. Well, the cultural nuances, business protocols, gift-giving, bowing, seating charts. Marcus nodded slowly. Ah, you're referring to keiretsu, the proper angle of a bow based on executive rank, and sekijun, the practice of seating by a company's founding date rather than its annual revenue. Is that correct? The room fell utterly silent. Marcus continued, his voice composed. Tanaka Industries was founded in 1952, during the post-war reconstruction. They will expect a gift that acknowledges their family's contribution to Japan's economic miracle, not an expensive item that implies we are trying to buy their loyalty. Thorne's jaw was slack. And Sharma Holdings, by contrast, operates on an Anglo-Indian business model. Direct communication, minimal ceremony, and absolute punctuality. Mrs. Sharma will view an elaborate gift exchange as a waste of valuable time. Marcus looked around the table, his voice firm. The challenge is to balance both cultures without causing offense. Tanaka in the seat of honor, Sharma with a clear and direct line of sight to all presentation materials. Silence. Then, David Lee abruptly switched to Mandarin, a clear test. So, you claim to be fluent in Mandarin? Marcus replied instantly, flawlessly, without a hint of an accent. He spoke about patent law, partnership structures, and legal frameworks, all in impeccable, technical Mandarin. David Lee's face went pale. Where did you study? The University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, and 5 years at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. Thorne, still grasping for a foothold, refused to yield. Fine, you know your languages, but you worked for this company for 3 years as a driver. Why didn't you ever say anything? The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Marcus looked at Thorne, his eyes holding no anger, only a deep weariness. I did, Mr. Thorne. On many occasions. He turned to Victoria. Last year, before the Seoul deal, I attempted to warn you about a translation error. I was told to just drive. Victoria closed her eyes, a wave of shame washing over her. 6 months ago, before Berlin, I knew what the problem was. I was told that no one pays you to think. Marcus's voice was devoid of bitterness, filled only with the simple weight of truth. So, I stopped trying. I chose to believe that one day my specific knowledge would be needed. He paused. Today, it finally is. Victoria stood, her voice low but sharp as a razor. Ladies and gentlemen, for 3 years, we have had one of this country's most accomplished diplomats in our employ, and we have had him fetching my coffee. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with a State Department citation. Presidential Commendation for Averting the Collapse of U.S.-China Trade Relations, 2018. Marcus Thorne shifted uncomfortably. Next slide. Lead Negotiator, Asia-Pacific Economic Framework, the very foundation of our international business model. David Lee looked as if he might be sick. Another slide. A letter of recommendation from former Japanese Prime Minister Ito for mediating the Okinawa Base Accord in 2020. Diane Foster stared, speechless. Victoria turned off the projector. Her voice was quiet but heavy with meaning. For 3 years, we had an asset beyond measure, and we used him to drive me to Starbucks. The boardroom was silent, the air thick with regret. Effective immediately, Victoria announced, Marcus Hayes is our new Senior Vice President of International Relations. His salary will be $280,000 plus stock options. He will report directly to me. She closed her laptop with a decisive snap. Are there any further questions about Mr. Hayes's qualifications? No one moved. Good, because he is about to save our company. One by one, the executives rose, approaching Marcus with offered apologies, handshakes, and gestures of long overdue respect. When the room had finally cleared, Marcus turned to Victoria, a faint wry smile on his lips. Ready, Miss Sterling? Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile she'd had in months. Ready, Mr. Vice President.